Hello and welcome to the Myositis Association's Empowerment Clinic on Relationships and Chronic Illness. My name is Rachel Bromley. I'll be your host this evening. I am also TMA's Senior Manager of Patient Education, Support, and Advocacy. Today we have the honor of speaking with Dr. Lee Phillips. Dr. Phillips is an award-winning psychotherapist with over 13 years of experience. He is a licensed clinical social worker and a certified substance abuse counselor in the state of Virginia. He is a licensed independent clinical social worker in Washington, D.C., and a licensed certified social worker at the clinical level in the state of Maryland. In addition, he is a licensed clinical social worker in the state of New York, so his work spans many states. It's very impressive. He is also a certified sex therapist by the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. In addition, he is certified by the Integrative Sex Therapy Institute as a certified sex and couples therapist. He has worked in several mental health and substance abuse treatment settings, including outpatient community mental health, inpatient psychiatric settings, and private practice. Dr. Phillips holds a Doctor of Education degree in organizational leadership with an emphasis in behavioral health from Grand Canyon University in Phoenix, Arizona. He also writes for Psychology Today, Your Tango, Psych Central, and Psych Alive. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Phillips.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We are excited to have you. Also joining us today are Kent Yunker and Janice Healy. Kent and Janice currently live in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, about an hour north of Chicago. They have been married for 16 years and friends for more than 20 years. They have 4 children from Kent's previous marriage, as well as 7 grandchildren and 5 grand dogs. And we may be hearing from some of them at some point during this webinar, so we'll see. Their passions and hobbies include traveling, cooking, art, entertaining, loving on their 4-legged children, enjoying their new home, outdoor living space, and hot tub. For the past 46 years, Kent has been employed at the family business, which designs, creates, and installs retail graphics for national clients. Janice is a former retail executive and former client of Kent's. She is currently consulting for the industry. Kent was diagnosed with IBM in June of 2018, although he has likely had it as early as 2016. The progression has been significant these past 2 years. Not only is he a TMA member, he also serves on the TMA Patient and Family Advisory Council. Kent and Janice, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All right. It takes a lot to get to basically broadcast your relationship for an audience. And so we really appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to share and your dogs.
She agrees.
You can go on mute now. We're about to go into Dr. Phillips' presentation. If you have any questions, put them in the Q&A box and we will answer them at the end of the show. So go ahead, Dr. Phillips.
Great. Well, I'm so excited to be here to be part of this empowerment clinic on a topic that's just so needed. And so in my work and in my practice, I hear a lot of questions. And so some of those questions that really come up in my practice are, how do I juggle my needs of being ill and disabled? How do I support the needs of my partner who is healthy? How can I cope with feelings of inadequacy or shame due to my illness? How do I keep it together for my partner who is battling a chronic illness? What if I become burned out? Is this more than I bargained for? And I no longer feel sexual and my body is broken. The thing that we have to realize is that intimacy in a relationship, it really does involve a wide mix of feelings and emotions. And when both the individual and their partner are battling a disease, the future of their intimate lives, it really does become uncertain and both partners suffer the loss. The ill partner may feel shame about the changes in their sexuality. Their partner may feel shame that they still have a normal sexual desires and needs. But what we have to realize is that suffering from a chronic illness, it may not only mean restricting intimacy, but it can also reduce the capacity to become aroused. And this may be one of the most difficult parts of a chronic medical illness. Both partners may feel less attractive, less confident, and concerned about how their body may work and adapt to an illness. Both partners may become plagued with anxiety due to the worry and the reduced sexual activity, and they may fear their future. But most of all, one of the things that happens in order to reclaim intimacy is really there needs to be communication, and there really needs to be the process of working through the grief that occurs due to chronic illness. And so those are really critical factors of what we have to work through. And so on that note, I'm going to share my screen with you. I'm going to go back real quick. So one of the things that I really want to talk to you this evening that's really critical here is really looking at the grief process that occurs with a chronic illness. And that's really important because a lot of times in order to get to a place of acceptance and to reclaim intimacy and to remain close to your partner, we really want to work through that grief process that comes up. And the thing that we have to realize about grief is that it's not linear. So people can oscillate between different stages, and then really looking at caregiving and what that looks like to a certain extent, and then techniques to really look at enhancing your communication, because intimacy at its heart, it's all about communication. So one of the things that tends to happen at times, and now this is not for everyone, right? Because we know that every diagnosis is very different, but one thing that can occur is denial. What do you mean this is happening to me? How can this happen to me? What are you talking about here, right? So there can be a big factor that does play into denial, because really what's happening is people are in a crisis of what's occurred, not really knowing how to really deal with that. And so one of the defense mechanisms, it may be a state of denial. Anger. How can someone not have anger as it relates to a chronic illness, right? So that's one emotion that tends to show up all the time in my office, but also just with the individual and with their partner. So having to really work through that anger on what's occurring to them. Bargaining. I would do anything to have my old body back. I would do anything to be healthy again, so we see that happen as well before we get to this next phase, which is depression, right? And depression shows up very different for everyone, but the way that we really measure depression, a lot of people say, oh, you have to have a sad mood. Well, you may have a sad mood, but one of the things that we really look at is someone's eating and sleeping. So someone may be sleeping too much, they're not sleeping enough, and also their eating habits. They may be overeating, or they may not have much of an appetite. So depression plays a big factor. And the thing with depression that we have to realize is that it goes into remission, right? And then it can get triggered again. Sometimes you can have a relapse with symptoms, and that can also trigger depression. And then we come to this word of acceptance. The thing that we really have to realize with acceptance is that it's not always positive or negative. It's a state of being. It's accepting where you are. And what we find in the research as it relates to chronic illness is that when someone can accept where they're at in that moment, they have something that they can work with. Sometimes they can manage their symptoms a lot better. Whereas if they're in a state of anger, if they're in a state of denial, even if they're in depression or they're avoiding their emotions, they may find a series of relapse that may occur. So let's look at the effects of the illness on the relationship. Change in the roles. Maybe the partner, prior to getting sick or ill, did more things around the home. They initiated things. They had a lot of responsibility. And the other partner, maybe they were the one that was so busy that they didn't get a chance to do that. And now they're having to step into that role. So what we see is a change in the dynamics. Maybe the one partner who has a chronic illness, they may not be able to do much around the house, or if they're having flares up or different symptoms that, exacerbate, then they will need to have much needed help. And so we do see a change in the dynamic in the relationship, which can cause tension and a state of grief. Independent to dependent. This is something that's very hard for someone that has a chronic illness. They lived in this state of independence, and all of a sudden they have to be dependent, not only on their partner, but other people as well, right? So they have a support system. The goal is to really get to a place where you can really accept where you're at, to where it's okay to be dependent on your partner, right? And that's one thing that we really strive for when I work with couples in therapy. Caregiving stress. There can be a state of caregiving stress that can occur in a relationship, but also we look at caregiving as a very rewarding thing that happens too. Sometimes partners love doing that for their partner. They really enjoy that. So we try to normalize that and really try to help the couple and what they can do as far as burnout, as far as their stressors, right? How to reduce their stress as much as possible when we're working in relationship therapy. So there is a type of relationship therapy that I use, and I've been trained in several different models, but the one that I love is Imago Relationship Therapy, IRT. So Imago is Latin for image, and it also reflects the mature stage of a butterfly. And so it's based on the theory that the frustrations, the conflicts of feelings experienced during childhood often manifest themselves in our adult relationships when we really seek a partner who is the image of a childhood caretaker. So the partner choice reflects a longing to integrate really a part of ourselves wounded in childhood. And the thing of it is that we all have childhood wounds, right? Things that have happened in our past. And we hear a lot of messages from our childhood, messages from our caretakers or our parents or our peers, our teachers. And so we imagine we will be healed by a partner who reflects what we have denied in our sight and need to heal. So really what that means is that we find a partner unconsciously based on the positive and negative characteristics of our caretakers. You may hear people say, oh, wow, she's just like my mother, or he's a lot like my father. A lot of times we will see that in our partners. There is no coincidence that we choose partners we do, as we do so based on their similarities and differences of our partners. However, I have to say, I do have patients in therapy where, they will come in and say, Dr. Lee, he's nothing like my father because I didn't want to marry my father. I wanted someone completely different from my parents. And so that also happens too, because we need that for healing. If we come from a family system where there's a lot of expressed emotion and there's a lot of enmeshment, we may want to find a partner who can heal us so we don't have to have that enmeshment. Or if we came from a family dynamic where there is a lot of like detachment or avoidance, we may want a partner where we can feel connected and we want to be attached. And so we search for that. However, that is unconscious. Even in the best childhoods, people don't always get their needs met, right? There's always things that are left behind, or you may grow up in a family system where you may have a sibling where a lot of attention has to go to them and you kind of get pushed to the side. So family dynamics are very interesting. Although this enables individuals to grow up and take care of themselves as independent functional adults, it can also mean that they seek another person who will fulfill those unmet needs when they grow up. So what we find is in the initial romantic stage of a relationship prior to an illness, those unmet needs are met as each partner feels safe, they feel connected, and they feel relaxed. However, when that romantic phase ends and an illness strikes, or they feel that they can no longer fulfill each other's needs, emotionally or sexually, one or both partners may become critical or shaming, and they can withdraw or attack. Now, keep in mind that when people reclaim their intimacy in a relationship due to a chronic illness, they can feel safe, they can feel more connected, and they can feel more relaxed. And that's where I really come in to help that bridge happen. So in Imago therapy, I work with couples in this dynamic in order to heal each other from their childhood wounds and create a healthy relationship they desire by facilitating a dialogue that is characterized by active listening, mirroring, validation, empathy, behavior, and change requests that may happen. And what happens is in this process, the couple can really feel connected, but they can also differentiate. Differentiation is actually quite healthy because we have to look at our differences and how that can make us grow stronger and how we can have our own personal autonomy in a relationship. So from one session to the next, there's this new positive imprint that can be created, and gradually the couple can really move from like a power struggle to really a joint journey of understanding and connection. And that's really the whole purpose of doing this type of therapy. Now, that does take some time to get there. It's something that doesn't happen overnight. It really is a journey for the couple because they're having to go through stages of grief. They're having to go through different phases of a chronic illness. which that first one is a crisis where they are in a crisis. They're trying to maybe find a diagnosis. Then they go into stabilization where they may start a medication regimen. They're going to a team of doctors. They're trying to stabilize. Then that third phase of a chronic illness is called resolution, where they're becoming familiar with their illness. They may have a series of relapses because they have a dynamic illnesses where you have that. And then of course, that last phase is called integration. And in that integration phase, we may see more acceptance come in. And that's where we may see a reclaiming of intimacy that takes place. So in the Imago dialogue, it's very structured and it helps couples communicate around the difficulties due to their illness. So the dialogue starts with a person who is a sender, where they share their thoughts and their feelings, while the other partner, the receiver, listens and they validate and they empathize, and then both partners can really switch roles. So through these three critical steps, mirroring, validating, and empathizing, there's this active listening process, and it really is a good way to deal with conflict while letting both partners feel heard. That's really what people want when they're dialoguing or they're communicating to their partner. They want to feel heard, and sometimes they're not heard because there's reactivity. So for an example, if you were going to your partner and you're telling them something, 9 times out of 10, they're already thinking about how they're going to react to you. They're not even fully listening to you, right? That happens all the time. So we really want to try to contain the space for that. This is a copy of the dialogue. And these are some helpful sentence stems that you can use. You can use this dialogue when you're communicating about something that you're missing, if you're communicating about a task, if you're communicating about reclaiming your intimacy, if you're reclaiming certain things that you miss, things that you would like to do again, things that you haven't talked about in a long time. And so I find that this is very helpful. And one of the things that I do is that I have them do this in the session. And then afterwards, they talk about how they felt about it, what came up for them, what didn't work for them, what they would need to see more of. And then of course, I give my feedback as well. Because one of the things that I don't think partners do enough is to validate. Now, to validate, you don't have to agree with your partner. You're just acknowledging their feeling and where they're at. And that may be a feeling in the grief process. It may be a feeling of how they want to reclaim their intimacy due to illness. This is my contact information. So if you would like to follow me on Facebook, it's at Dr. Lee Phillips. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can follow me at Dr. Lee Phillips. There's my Twitter account. I did just take a break from Twitter. I'm back on there. My LinkedIn. I think sometimes we need breaks from social media. I think it can be healthy. My website is there as well. If you also want to email me any questions, you can certainly do that. So, all right.
Thank you so much, Dr. Phillips. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
We will circle back. If you have any questions for Dr. Phillips, put them in the Q&A and we will circle back to them. Now I'd like to talk to Kent and Janice. How are you doing tonight?
Fantastic, Rachel.
We're petrified that we're going to have some real big fans in our house. Barking or clapping, I'm not sure which one's going to be, but
Right.
no, we're
Well,
fine.
we'll hope that the dogs keep it down, but if they don't, it's okay. So, Kent, tell me a little bit about your diagnostic odyssey. How did your diagnosis come about?
Diagnosis, my job required me to do a lot of traveling, border to border, coast to coast, 2-3 weeks out of the month, sometimes. But the problem was I was starting getting weaker, and it manifested himself in me trying to climb up onto a bus at the airport for a rental car. And I just couldn't step up, and I couldn't pull up my luggage. And that was a warning for me. And just normal living, I was starting to fall off ladders. I was starting to get exhausted easy. And bottom line is that 2018, at a regular checkup for my arthritis, which I have quite a bit of due to my sports in my younger days, was the doctor came in and said, "Hey, Kent, how you doing?" And I just kind of looked at him and I said, "Not so good." And he said, "Well, what's up?" And I said, I weak. I can't throw a ball to either the two-legged kids or the four-legged kids." And we talked a little bit and he said, "Well, this isn't good." He says, we got to find out what it is. We started some blood work. And within about 2 weeks, he called me up on a Friday night and said, "Well, you have myositis, polymyositis." And I said, "Poly what?" And we got into a discussion there. They ordered a biopsy. Well, the biopsy actually came, and that's what gave me the diagnosis. But, and he said, "We're taking you off of all your medication. We're going to put you on prednisone, pretty big dose. We're going to blow out all your immune system. Don't catch a cold. Don't fly anywhere. Planes and jets are just petri dishes with wings, and you can't afford to get sick." So it was a trip from hell for about 5 months. The steroids were horrible. And then I went to Mayo Clinic, and they said, after 3-4 days of testing, they said, "Well, yes, you do have myositis, but we don't believe it's polymyositis. We think it's IBM, and we want to do another muscle biopsy." That confirmed it. And there was my diagnosis. So it pretty much was the biggest part of the journey as far as discovery. But then the journey took a turn and said, I wanted to find out as much information as I could. I wanted to be able to do all of the right things, eat the right food, do the right exercises, et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't really know where to go, especially diet. It was like, this has got to be so normal, easy thing. But yeah, everybody says, "Oh, your diet's fine." And then I ran into two wonderful things. First, I discovered TMA, and I'm not plugging you. This is really, I found a source, finally, people who knew what this was and what to do and where to go and where to ask. And the second thing I found was that there was a convention coming up in Minneapolis. So that was 2019. And the rest has been much better as far as understanding what I've got, where it's going. The worst thing is that when I was first diagnosed, I didn't know where to go. It was so frustrating, the misinformation. My daughter thought I was dying and told my granddaughters, "Grandpa's not going to be here next Christmas." And I'm going like,
Oh my gosh.
so it was just that kind of stuff that has all gotten a lot better, especially over the last 2 years where we've made such progress.
Well, how have you adapted your lifestyle to the illness? Janice is laughing.
No, I'm going to take care of
Yeah,
that.
all right, go ahead. What?
How have you adapted your lifestyle to the illness?
Tough thing was the job that I had at the family business. I've been there for all of my adult life, 47 years. And all of a sudden they said, "Go, you take care of your health first. Don't worry about your job. We've got it all covered here." And they said, and then COVID hit, and it was like, oh my gosh, now I'm working from home, which they wanted me to do anyway. But I felt useless. I wasn't doing what I did, and I couldn't have what I had as far as being a part of a team and making an impact on it. And that self-esteem really took a beating. I looked at my body and my withering bones and arms and legs, and the muscle I felt ugly. I felt unattractive. And it was just a personal thing that I had to work through. My wife was so supportive, and still is. I made a lot of funny noises. Every time I tried to get up, I was groaning. Every time I flopped down onto the couch, it was like, oh.
But I always know where he is.
Yes.
You always know where he
So I got
is.
that going for me. Go.
Well, Janice, that's a good segue to you. What has your experience with Kent's diagnosis been like?
Well, I think at first it was just acceptance. Like he said, let's get as much information as we can, right? Let's understand what it is we're up against. Let's not project something that maybe isn't. And once we got to that place, you talk about anger. There was no anger. I would say maybe irritation from time to time because we couldn't do some of the things that we like to do.
Or frustration.
One thing is, we'll find our courses colliding every once in a while. And when I say that, it's he wants to live life as normally as he possibly can. And I completely understand that. I, on the other hand, am hypersensitive to keeping him safe. Like, I think my most used phrase in the house is, where's your cane? Where's your cane? There's his cane.
Do you want to tell the story about the cane in the hospital?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I started working at therapy, and I was being interviewed by the therapist when the first day there, and she said, "So, do you use a cane?" I said, "Oh yes, I use a cane. My wife makes sure I use a cane. She told me that if I don't use the cane, she's going to use the cane on me." And little did I know that she was typing all of this into the report. And the next day I get a report from the hospital to the therapy center, and I'm reading what she wrote, and all of a sudden I go like, "Oh." And I call her immediately. She says, "Oh, okay, I can delete that. I haven't put it in yet. No problem." So,
Patient is unsafe at home.
so much for
Things
Mr.
are
Funny Man.
unsafe at home. Yeah, you got to be careful joking around.
Yeah, who's laughing now?
But I think one thing, Dr. Phillips, that you brought up was this whole idea of role reversal and changing of roles. I think that's been an adjustment for us.
Sure.
Now we have a gym in our home now, so I work out every day, and I work out every day just to make sure that I can do those physical things that
Right.
Kent was an athlete in the day, so I didn't ever have to do any of that. But at the same time, then it's, well, what can he do that I used to do? And so there's things like, I don't empty the dishwasher, Kent empties the dishwasher. There's different chores around the inside of the house that he can still do. So we try to maintain that balance so that he has a sense of purpose, and like he was saying, that he's not feeling awful about it. And I think one of the other changes, you mentioned in the beginning, Rachel, that we love art and travel, and so that lifestyle adjustment has been it's been a journey for us. And it's everything from, we used to just impulsively stop in a little town and go through art shops and walk around and stop and have a beer, and now we can't do that on impulse anymore. We really have to think about it practically, because there are mobility tools that we need. Will we need a scooter for this? Is he better off in a wheelchair for something like this? So we have to be more pragmatic in those kinds of activities. So it's not that we can't do them. It's just, it's a new normal, right? We don't concentrate on the old. We look at what's this new normal? How do we adjust to that? And how do we still be able to enjoy the things that deep down brought us together in the first place? These things that we love to do together.
To both of you, what relationship skills have you needed to rely on through this journey?
Well, I've got a couple of suggestions, and it's things pretty much that I've learned from Janice, and maybe Janice has learned from me, maybe. Both of us, both people. When I say both, you've got the patient, you've got a caregiver or a spouse or family, but both sides need to be great communicators. Don't pretend to know what others are thinking, feeling, implying.
And that is a good one, because I would say, how can you tell me how I'm feeling? It's like, you can't tell me that. Only I can tell you that.
Share what's going on outside and inside your heads. Share whatever you're feeling, what your fears are, what makes you crazy, what do you love? But we can't understand nobody, either of you can't understand or help if we don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So that was the one. My wife has taught me always assume the best. So if she comes in and I say, "Hey, honey, how you doing?" She goes, "Fine." I thought, oh, she's mad at me about something. And I'd start getting, she goes, "No, I'm not mad at you. I'm tired. It's been a long day. And now I got to make dinner or whatever." But, you know, I would always assume that something else. And so she says, always assume the best first. All right. Yes, she still loves me, but how can I help her out or something like that? Ask for forgiveness and forgive. We all get exhausted physically, emotionally. We are vulnerable. We can all lose it once in a while. It's easy to drop our guard and say and do things that we wish we could take back. Reconcile as soon as possible. It's normal, but you don't think about it. Being mad or being mad is not a good state to stay in. I was going to say something else like that.
Well, and,
No.
and I'll add to that though. Yes, talk about it, but then there's sometimes that you don't talk about it. Make it okay to not be okay some days. Like it's okay, and we don't have to talk it to death. And know that I love you, and I just need some time. And understanding that I think is huge for us.
Here's one that says, "Don't carry unnecessary baggage." It says, "This disease is a long journey. Travel light." Look for joy. Laugh a little bit every day if you can. Watch movies, comedies, comedians. For us old guys, let's watch Johnny Carson back from the 70s and 60s. Pretty funny. Late night shows. Couples. Have a couple date nights. TVs, movies, friends over, entertaining, all of that stuff. You've got to look for new joys in your life, even though some things don't work as well as they did before you had the disease. Don't isolate. We were not meant to be alone as human beings. Be at peace with your spouse, family, friends. Whatever it takes, stay connected. And then lastly, there are 4 words that can change everything. We can say, well, I have to get up now. Or you could change it and say, I get to get up now. I have to go see the doctor. No, I get to go see the doctor. And when you start thinking of this as, look, you can still do things. You can still be things. And we always say like, oh, I have to clean the house. Hey, you have a house you can clean. And it's so change the attitude. That's what it is. Change your attitude and change your lives and how you look at it.
That's amazing, because gratitude is just so key. So Janice, I have a toughie for you.
Oh, great.
Has myositis brought you two closer together or farther apart?
I don't think it's one or the other. It's just different, right? Like it's just accepting. I'll go back again to accepting a new normal. It's not a bad thing and it's not a good thing. I mean, there's 2 sides to it, but there's contentment in today. And that's how we try to live. Like I can get physically and emotionally exhausted sometimes if I think about what has to happen in the next week or 3 weeks. But if I just take it a day at a time, then that's okay, right? So I think it's, we're as close as we've ever been. It's just not the same, nor would I expect it to be the same.
I actually put a lot of time into this. I've just got a 2
he put his glasses on.
Okay.
Oh boy.
All right, so we both love adventures, exploring, cooking, and entertaining. We love traveling, especially romantic getaways. We love just being together. We care deeply, trust completely, and love unconditionally. We are best friends. We call what we have magic. Early on in my diagnosis, I feared that some of the magic would be compromised. And obviously, a lot of things have changed. But the important things, the caring, patience, the smiles, commitment, and love has not changed. We still have adventures, but they're different. We still explore and entertain, but it has a different look and feel and a pace. We had to adjust, and we will probably always have to adjust to one degree or another. Most importantly, we focus on what we can still do, not on what we cannot do anymore. Or to put it another way, we count our blessings and not our losses. It's a great way to spend the day. It's a great way to end the day. This is the last part. It says, I believe that when love is honest, pure, and true, if and when there is a crisis or a catastrophe, that love can and will grow stronger and deeper than it was before. That's why we call it magic. That's it.
You guys are gonna make me cry.
We are
Oh
very
my
blessed.
goodness.
We are
We're
very,
very
very
blessed.
blessed.
So
And
glad
that's
to
not
hear
to
that.
say that it isn't hard. It is hard. I mean, it's
Mhm.
a change in your life. Neither one of us expected this at this stage in our life. But
Mhm.
again, it goes back, Rachel, to what you said. It's that gratitude. You have to have an attitude of gratitude and
Mhm.
count the
Mhm.
blessings of what you have. There are so
Mhm.
many people that have so many larger problems and worse
Mhm.
diagnoses. So
It's true.
Mhm.
Do you have any other advice for other couples dealing with myositis?
Yeah. One of my favorite self-talks is no stinking thinking. I was diagnosed with myositis. It wasn't ALS, which they tested me for, or MS. I didn't have a heart attack or a stroke. I'm still living a semi-normal life, much more normal than people who are quadriplegics or paraplegics. And I have no reason to be a victim of this disease. I adjust, we change, we have new normals, and we do it together. So
and we cut each other some slack. I'll continue to
Yes.
say
I'm going to
that.
quote you
You
on
have
that.
to cut each other slack.
Grace
that
is
down.
key. Yes. We are
Except
recording
when it
this.
comes to leaving your cane in the other room.
um,
He would use it on me. What do you think? No, seriously,
All right.
we appreciate being on here and listening to Dr. Phillips, and
Mhm.
we hope some of the things that we've experienced will help some of the people out there. You know, there's something that I truly believe in, is that, you know, we can have wisdom, we can have knowledge, we can have empathy, but if we don't share this knowledge, this wisdom, if we don't reach out to others and help out, it's a tragedy, not
Mhm.
Right. Mhm.
nothing less. So
Well, thank you so much for sharing what has helped you two as a couple, and we really appreciate your vulnerability. And stay online because we may
Yeah.
have additional questions for you. I want to circle to the Q&A and talk to Dr. Phillips.
Mhm.
Dr. Phillips, we have a very sad situation that has come up by an anonymous attendee. My husband left home 3 months ago and said he wanted to live his illness, his IBM, alone. I do not have contact or intimacy with him. He is completely isolated. How often do you see this reaction? Before the diagnosis, we did everything together, and the situation is extremely shocking.
Well, I'm very sorry to hear that. That's disheartening. And I have heard it before. You know, unfortunately, one of the things that I try to look at is how was the couple doing prior to a diagnosis, right? What was the relationship like? And I'm wondering if there was something going on there, maybe not. Unfortunately, we have some alarming statistics in the research that 75% of marriages actually end due to chronic illness. But a lot of that, I think, is really due to the dynamic that was going on prior to it, like what I was just saying. And I'm just wondering what was going on, you know, with him before he left. Because usually when something like this does occur, there's a closeness and a bond that happens. So I'm really sorry to hear that. And unfortunately, when people become ill with certain diagnoses, they have their own ways of coping. And so sometimes they become this withdrawer and they isolate and they want to be alone. Whereas other people, they really want the support and they want that help. So I really hope that you're finding the support that you need to get through this more than anything. So
Yes.
yeah.
And we have a caregivers group that meets, even if you aren't caregiving at the moment, you're still welcome to go to our calendar and come to our group so you can feel connected. We don't want you to feel isolated yourself from your myositis family. We're here for you. Okay. Dr. Lee, what is the success rate with your IRT clients, and do you find a lot of resistance from either side?
Great question. Of course I do. And I think the resistance is there because they're not sure how it's going to work. You know, people really question going into therapy. You know, you come in and it takes a lot of courage, a lot of vulnerability. So people are very ambivalent a lot of times in the beginning, but I don't really know what my percentage is with success rate, but I have to say, I mean, I'm very busy and I'm full and I don't have room for any more patients. So I guess I'm doing something right by helping people. And the thing of it is that sometimes imago relationship therapy, it may not work for the couple. I may have to change things up a bit. You know, it's not a cookie cutter approach, right? So something may be very different that I may have to use in my sessions. But I do find it is one of those methods that works because you feel heard and you can listen. And when you're doing imago therapy, it's not always about dialogue and a problem. You can come in and dialogue how close you are, just with what we've heard this couple this evening talk about and the joys that they have in this new normal. So it's definitely helpful. And I definitely encourage people to go to therapy if they really feel they need a safe space to be able to process.
I also wanted to talk about, you know, we're interviewing a married couple here, but relationships and chronic illness aren't just about, you know, people who are partnered up. We have different relationships with our friends, our family, our neighbors. And the next question kind of talks about that we have in Q&A, because she's got a comment. She was diagnosed with DM at 31 years old, and the biggest challenge during her illness was society questioning it because she looked okay on the outside. How could she be so sick? Some family and friends didn't quite understand it, and that was very hurtful. It took me a long time to find my peace. So how do you work with people to help them get their family and friends to understand that myositis is a real disease, it's a serious disease, and just because it can be invisible doesn't make it any less real?
Right, that's an excellent question. I think one of the things that comes up is that there's so many different groups of illnesses or diseases. And I think invisible illnesses are very hard to understand because there's this, you know, this misconception that goes on that, you know, if you're not wheelchair bound, you should be able to walk and you should be able to function in society. But invisible illnesses are a mystery. And just because you see someone walking around, it doesn't mean that they don't have a disability, right? So I think a lot of it has to do with education. If the family is willing to attend family therapy, you know, it's funny, I had a client years ago that had multiple sclerosis. And when she was first diagnosed, I mean, you know, she could walk, see, hear, bend down, do what she needed to do. And her family just did not understand it. So one of the things that we talked about in therapy was having her leave these little brochures around the house so they could pick it up and read about it. And they found it to be very helpful. And eventually, you know, her family came into a session with her to get some information on it, which I think is critical. So I think a big part of it is education. Being able to educate people about certain things and not have these assumptions about things, right? I think that's critical. And I like what you're talking about, Rachel, with support. I always ask my patients in therapy, who's your support system outside of therapy? So joining online, I mean, gosh, technology these days, online support groups, so, caregiver groups, different hospitals have different support groups that people can go to as well, different meetup groups that people can attend. So I think it's really important to have some type of support group. I facilitate a chronic pain management group that meets the fourth Thursday of the month, and it's really turned into a women's group, and it's always been a women's group, how it's turned out, and it's a great place for support. So it's always important to find that. And so I highly encourage, whether that's friends, support groups, other places, go out and find that, just like what Kent was saying with the Myositis Association, finding out information. And I love the approach that they use. Let's accept where we are and get information on this. And that's very powerful, right?
It is powerful.
Right.
You sent me questions that you ask of your clients when they come in for therapy. And I wanted to talk about one of these. It asked them about how much of a difficult time talking about your illness and the problem it brings. How do you work with your clients to help them kind of bridge that unease?
Well, I think we really have to look at, where they are in their journey. So if they're in a place of acceptance, they tend to be able to talk about it just fine. They want to come in and get support, but often they don't really know how to start that process. So I think it's an idea of curiosity and really the rapport building process. I think in this type of work that we do as sex therapists, relationship therapists, psychotherapists, is that it's all about the way we welcome our clients and the warmth that we can give them and the empathy. And I think the more that we can show that empathy and support and to let them know that, hey, this is a tough journey you're on, but it can be a journey of creativity and a journey of support. And I think that is really where it starts. It's making them feel comfortable to come in, because they may be afraid of that. They may be in a state of denial, or they may be ambivalent because here I'm going to go in and talk to this doctor about my emotions and my feelings, and I've never done that before. How's this really going to help me? So I think that's really the place that we start, is empathy.
Have you found in your experience that maybe the chronic illness is kind of like the last straw? I mean, that pushes them into therapy, and then they have other issues that you have to work with them on in order to even get them to a place to deal with the chronic illness?
It can be. It can be. Sometimes that can be the pushing force, but there could be other things that were going on in their past that they start to talk about. Sometimes I have chronically ill patients that come in and talk to me, and it's not even about their illness. They just know that I'm aware. I'm a chronic illness therapist. They may come in and talk about a family member that they're dealing with and how it can cause a flare up, or how their stress can cause a flare up. They may come in and talk about a career change. They may want to come in and talk about a mental health problem that's associated. With a chronic illness, we do see a lot of comorbidity, right? So there's a lot of like depression and stress and anxiety that can come along with it. So they may come in and talk about something completely different. They may want to come in and talk about sex. They may not even want to talk about, we've accepted our illness, we're here, I still have desire, I still have arousal, I want to be able to have sex, and I don't know how to go about talking to that with my partner. Or if I'm single, how do I go about dating with a chronic illness?
Yes.
So there's a lot of different things that tend to come up, right?
Well, put your questions in the Q&A. He brought it up. So if you have any questions about sex, it's time to ask them. But let's see. Kent and Janice, did you have any questions for Dr. Phillips?
Yeah. What's it going to take to slide in if you're not taking any more patients? I was really counting on this. Somebody needs help here. One of us really needs some help.
I'll make an exception for you, only because I like where you're.
You mean for her?
because I like where you're at on your journey.
Yes, it's so inspirational. Oh my
It is
goodness.
so inspirational. I mean, I have to
Mhm.
say, and you guys, it really touched me where you're at and how you've approached this. I think I'm gonna have to have you on my podcast.
This is just the start of
I
the
think we can
tour.
get an appointment
Yeah.
now.
I think we
Yeah,
can get an
yeah.
appointment. There you go.
We
Right,
had another
yeah.
question come in. Let's see who it's for. Kim just said, what about sex? So I guess go ahead. What advice do you have for your clients that are having
Mhm.
questions about sex and chronic
Mhm.
illness and
Mhm.
just in general?
Well, I think a lot of times we have to look at where they're at on their journey. That's the most important thing. And then one of the things that we tend to see is that there's a lack of desire. Desire is wanting it, arousal is the biological aspects that come up. So we have to see where people are at. My mantra has always been get curious about your partner and get creative with your sex because you are in a new normal. So things may work differently. You may not have the energy level for sex. If you're having an issue with that, we talk about, well, when do you have energy? That's the time to change roles. That's the time to look at what your sexual peak is. So it's getting creative. And the thing of it is that we have to realize the skin is the largest it is the largest area on our bodies to get creative. The brain is the powerhouse, right? But we can look at other ways to have pleasure. There's an umbrella of things that fall under that. We have erogenous zones that we can tap into. So the biggest thing is having a conversation about it and really being
Right.
able to integrate those things that you could do into your past into your new normal, right?
Mhm.
So that's the thing. There's no right way to have sexual intimacy.
Mhm.
It can be whatever you want it to be. And so it's being able to talk about it with your partner. Sex at its heart, it's all about communication.
Right.
Mhm.
No one else is putting in follow-up questions in there. um, so you've got a question for your patients on here where you ask them, do you worry whether your partnership can withstand the long-term stress of having a chronic illness? And
Mhm.
Kent talked about this a little bit in our prep about how, and Kent, you can jump in here, just you're worried about how that may progress. You're not certain how it will progress. And so does that play a lot in your emotional well-being?
Mine?
Yes.
I did.
Yeah, you're
I
the
didn't
only
know.
Kev here.
I didn't know if it was the situation is, yeah, I don't want to stop doing things with my wife. And she does so much for me. And the last thing I want to do is continue to be less helpful, able to help. And so that's a concern for me. But again, there's so many other parts to this, it's not, I asked her, there's a book out called 5 Love Languages, and it's a great book. Every couple should look at it and read it. It's wonderful. I asked her, I said, with this disease, I thought I used to know what your love language was. And I said, I honestly don't know how to love you like we used to. And she goes, time together. That's it. Time together. We used to go out and do so much and just create memories on top of memories. And she goes, and that's what I want to continue to do. We just have to redefine it.
Mhm.
And I go like, great. This is good. I mean, but I needed to do that because I didn't think I was, she gets exhausted and she kind of crawls into her own space and tries to get everything done that she can get done. And I'm sitting there going like, oh, this is not good. This is just not good. It's not fair for her to have to do this. And if I say something to her, if I can, like, can I help? She goes, yeah, go sit down. This is a one butt kitchen.
Yeah, that's the thing. We have a one butt kitchen.
So it's that type of thing. And as I said, the less mobile I get, the more concerned I am. But we'll take it one day at a time.
Mhm.
One day at a
Yeah.
time, and we'll make the very best of that day. And tomorrow we'll start over again, and we will talk about what we can do, not what we can't do or what we've lost. So.
Thank you. And Dr. Phillips, before we go, what do you wish if you could wave a magic wand on all of your clients, what do you wish that they would just get?
That you can still live a life well, even though it can be restricted by illness at times. You can still do things. You can realize that your illness is only a part of you, and really being able to integrate the things you love into your new normal, which we heard tonight from this wonderful couple. That would be my magic wand if I could do that, you know.
That is wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on tonight. We appreciate you being here. Kent, Janice, it was an honor to speak to you. Just so motivational, so inspirational. We're really happy to have you on, and thank you for sharing your journey. Dr. Phillips, you're an inspiration too. You guys find him on all of his media. I hear there may be eventually a book deal. We don't know, but I'm waiting for it. So it's got to happen. But thank you for joining the Myositis Association's Empowerment Clinic. We are hoping you will join us for our next one. We have Ask the Doc with dermatologist Dr. Victoria Worth. That'll be Thursday, April 21st from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern. So be sure to join us. For TMA, I'm Rachel Bromley. Good night.